Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Welcome to another episode of Rock That Relationship. Tracy and I are here today to talk all about conflict negotiation. This is part of our bigger season all on divorces, and this particular episode is all about negotiating with a ex or soon-to-be ex, in theory, about making it through the divorce process. And for those of you who are not getting divorced but might be separating or might be in a breakup where it wasn't a legal marriage, you might find some of these things also very useful as you divide out assets and sort of figure out what next steps are in your trajectories as people who are no longer in a relationship. So, Tracy,
even if you're contemplating getting out of a relationship, these are things you should think about.
Absolutely, right?
You know, look ahead.
Look ahead. Exactly. It's that planning and that kind of, a little bit of strategery, just kind of, don't go into conflict negotiation not at all prepared. So Tracy, I'm going to just start out by asking you this question because I know you do it more with, in your role in family law, is really, what is it that when people come to you and they're in a divorce situation, in this case in particular, that they need to or often have to negotiate?
Well, people schedule a consultation, right? So I talk to them first through the law firm and then say, okay, are you sure that you want to get divorced? Have you guys tried counseling? And determine if these people are for real, right? And I'm only talking to one of the parties because I'm a litigator, not a mediator at this point. And so I only talk to one person. Although I did one time have two people call and they just wanted help doing the paperwork. And I was very proud that they were being so amicable. But I have a client now who is still living with her ex, and they are actually being amicable. And so we've decided, I'm just kind of advising her on what to do. And my suggestion for everybody, absent physical abuse or severe mental abuse, to try and negotiate everything that you can before you file for divorce. And try and get all the financial stuff worked out first, if you can, because then the court doesn't really have a say over anything. And when you have property, like a house or something, if you two can't decide what to do with it, the court will decide and the court will force a sale.
So if you could determine these things ahead of time, that's what I did with one of my partners, where we weren't legally married because that wasn't an option at the time, but we did have to split assets. And so it was really helpful for us to do that amicably because it may not have been exactly 50-50, but it was what we agreed to. We thought we each wanted to stay in one of our houses. She wanted to stay in our family home and I wanted to stay in what was our rental property. And it made it really easy to say, okay, well, how do we make this the best situation for both people? I feel like, and what you're saying is if we hadn't been able to come to terms and then we would have gone and gotten some kind of legal help on that particular thing, we may have been fighting over how many bedrooms each other gets and that kind of thing, which wasn't a factor when we actually initially divided out the properties.
Well, and you said something interesting because you said, well, it wasn't exactly 50-50. Well, it doesn't have to be. And not every state requires it to be 50-50. They require it to be equitable. Arizona is a community property state, so people think of it as 50-50. And it generally is 50-50 for everything. But that if you're deciding it amongst yourselves prior to filing with the court and or subjecting yourself to a judge's decision making, you can come up with anything. It could be 25-75. As long as both people are voluntarily informed of everything that's going on, then you can make your own decisions. And that's another thing about hiding assets and things. This is civil court, so it's never a good idea. So family court is civil court, although when you're not legally married, what you were talking about does not go through family court. So even though you were in a romantic relationship and having a child with a partner, you would have had to go through civil court and not family court.
Okay.
And here in the state of Arizona, if let's say you're together for 20 years, but you're only married for 10 years, only the 10 years count. So you got to be really careful about that stuff. And, property and all of that stuff. it's so romantic to get a house together, or buy a farm together, or start a business together, but you better talk to a lawyer first, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is fascinating to me how many people don't ever consult a lawyer, a therapist, a coach, a counselor, or whatever before they enter into these very serious relationships.
Right. Well, you think about like even a house, right? You go buy a house with someone, that whether you're married or not, that's a legal arrangement. And if you decide that there's some other type of arrangement that you need to have after that, and you have to figure out who's going to buy each other out of the house, I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not just like, oh, I'm walking into this open house and I got my twinkle in my eyes and let's buy this.
Right.
And like, who puts the down payment down? Does one person put more down than the other? Does one person have more equity in the house than the other? Does one person,
it doesn't matter how they do it as long as they document everything and that they come up with a contract how to divide it later. Here's the other thing, like, I've lost my train of thought. It was something that you said, but, as far as like a house together, people don't understand this. You could say, okay, we're splitting up and I want to move to another state or something, so I'm fine with you keeping the house here. You want to stay here. But guess what? Now the person who stays here has to refinance it, and refinancing is not so easy. There's a lot of costs associated with refinancing. How's that person going to get a chunk of cash to pay you out if there is equity in the house, Sometimes the house just has to be sold because neither party is capable of refinancing and or paying the other person out.
Right. So
you have to get off the deed. You have to get off the mortgage, Well,
and that's the thing, the deed versus the mortgage. I've seen this happen too before, where someone isn't on the deed, but they're on the mortgage. One partner, and they're like, oh, well, I get the house. No, you don't. You're not on the deed, but you're still on the hook for paying for it. And this arrangement I've seen happen because people, whatever the reason is, they've done that. And
well, people do that for financing reasons, and I think that's very dangerous. And they also sign disclaimer deeds, and that does not allow them to stay in the home. They do have to leave. They could have an equity claim and get equity out of the house, but they don't actually have a right to the house. When you're both on the deed, then you have a right to be in the house. So you could fight for the house if you were able, And that's the other thing. Like, I don't believe in being attached to stuff. It's hard. It's hard to leave a house, but it's just a house, Right. But in this modern economy, houses are very hard to come by. Even apartments are hard to come by. Everything's expensive. And I don't know. It's interesting to me doing this work. Would I get married again? We've talked about this over and over. I don't know that I would. Would I give up my home? I don't know that I would. Because you're putting yourself at great risk, right? And also, it used to be, I think, the way that we were socialized and the way society was, okay, two people in a relationship, one person's not going to work and take care of the kids, the other person's going to work and pay for the house, right? But that doesn't really work anymore. And if you're going to be single ever in your life, like, you have to take care of yourself, and it's expensive. So you have to, like, think of that going forward, because if you end up getting married or whatever, you use a lot of financial resources to get out of that situation. Even cohabitating, right? You're going to spend money on attorneys, or you're going to spend money refinancing. And I think people don't really consider fully what that means or how that looks.
Well, and when you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, this notion of conflict negotiation, which is, really what we're hitting on today is, some people, it's obviously it's a logistical thing. Like, I need a place to live, or we need to divide up the assets, or I don't want to carry that person's debt, or spousal maintenance, all that stuff, push pull, because there's some logistical reasons to have that money or to have that security. But there's also kind of a battle, right? Like this battle of I want to win, or I want to get what's due to me, or I want to get what's fair to me, or whatever. You can phrase it in any which way. But that's why you get into a situation where, people will spend $4,000 on legal fees to fight over a pad of paper because they want to win, right? Which is that conflict negotiation piece. When I know you say to me all the time, let it go. This is going to cost you way more than whatever it is you're arguing about. Move
emotionally
on.
And financially.
Exactly.
Sometimes it doesn't, right? There's some things that have to be fought over. But like there's people that engage in win-lose negotiating and then win-win negotiating. I only do win-win. I really don't care to like win over another person, right? It doesn't do anybody any good. And there are people, especially people at higher levels of our society, who engage like that. And going up against a person like that will bankrupt you. It will break you. And sometimes it's better just to walk away.
Yeah. Well,
and if it's not fair,
right.
I've walked away from stuff that's not fair.
It's not fair. But the other thing too is like fair is always just a perspective, right? Like if you looked at when my ex-partner and I split up, we had 2 houses, and the house I was getting had 4 bedrooms, but they were much, much smaller. The house she had 3 bedrooms and a pool. It was worth more, the house that she had. But guess what? She wanted the pool. I didn't want the pool. And so like it's those kind of things where you can say the win-win is not so much that we got equal equity, right? The win-win was she got a house with a pool because she liked to swim, and I didn't want to have a pool. And she didn't care about 4 bedrooms, and I did. So like it's some of those kind of things when you go into the mentality of the kind of this fight mentality, which is just not productive. Sometimes you have to fight for things. You might, you know, you want to fight for custody of your kid, or you want to, you know, those kind of things. But some of this stuff at the end of the day, you can find a win-win, you know, and like the house example is a perfect example of a win-win. We both got what we wanted, but we had to talk about it. Cause at first we were like, should we sell the houses? What should we do?
Right. And you were able to talk about it. Now, not everybody is, because there's a high conflict or avoidant person on the other side. Either of those 2 personalities on the other side, you could be the most reasonable person on the planet. But if there's a high conflict or avoidant person on the other side of the equation, you're not going to have very much luck, and you're probably going to need attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's unfortunate, but that's a personality disorder or personality type or attachment style that doesn't work with, like, you know, conducive to coming to a reasonable conclusion, a resolution. I should say.
Exactly, and you probably will know that by virtue of having been in a relationship with that person. If they were a high
maybe, but
person,
actually, no, not always, because people get very different. Okay, if someone has a scarcity mentality, right? They could be in a relationship and everything's going fine and you don't really see it. Maybe you'll see it a little bit, but when it comes to getting divorced and splitting up assets, that stuff comes out like a demon. And people do change, and they also listen to other people who are saying all kinds of stuff to them. I'm very careful. I've had you read stuff that I've written. I make sure that, like, I'm not in a situation that either involves like relationship or legal stuff, that I'm having someone help me and advise me on how to deal with it. Because if my first reaction is reactionary, it's like yelling or it's wanting to lash out, that doesn't do me any good, right? And that's how I used to be for 30 years of my adult life. That didn't get me where I wanted to be, right? But if you have that person on the other side, you may not actually know. I think there's a lot of people who don't realize until they get to that point. I mean, they may have had an up and down or toxic relationship, but like the extent to which people will go. I mean, I was just in court the other day on a termination of parental rights. Guy hasn't seen the kid in 5 years, 4.5 years. He lives within 5 miles. He didn't respond to any of our pleadings. And then he showed up with a suit jacket on in the court hearing. Nothing. We hadn't heard from him before that. And it's like, wow, what is your deal, buddy? Right? Why are you here? It's not because you love this kid or care. You're here to cause problems. And so you also have to recognize that. Like, if you're entitled to a bunch of money or if you're entitled to whatever, but it is going to cost you because that person will hang on for dear life, you know, then maybe it's not worth it. But that's a personal decision that you have to make.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
So what we're really talking about is if someone displayed these kinds of behaviors and they were toxic and they were personality disordered or whatever they were in the relationship, they will likely be like that in the divorce.
Oh, yeah. Well, they will.
Well, they will. Sure. And then if they weren't during the relationship, they still could be. And so, you have to assess to what extent you're going to engage in this process kind of solo or amicably at first, and do as much pre-work as you can versus saying, I'm not even going to touch this. I'm getting a lawyer right away, being able to assess, because it's your own emotional well-being, right? I mean, as you're talking about, I mean, this process can really do a number on you. And so being able to set that up and anticipate that is really important.
Well, and we dropped that petition to terminate. We agreed with his lawyer because in that kind of case, that person gets a free lawyer by the state. And so he'll just go and go and go and go, right? Because he's not paying for it. So you also have to look at what does the other side have to gain? What are they willing to sacrifice? There are people willing to burn the house down, literally and figuratively, like to destroy the other person. And they will hang on. And when you have a person like that with their nails in it, and then you put your nails in it and you're both just back and forth tugging, I will not do that. I'm not interested. I don't like to do it as a lawyer, and I don't want to do it as a human being. Because I'd rather walk away from the money. I'd rather walk away from whatever than fight like that. Because you don't win in the end.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk about some of the strategies then. Like I know one of the big strategies for thinking, aside from kind of assessing what the situation is and predetermining the extent you want to like do amicable stuff at first and pre-work or go right to a lawyer. But in addition to that, sort of the more emotional components is, probably one of the very first things is knowing what you have, knowing what you want, knowing what you're negotiating. If you go into a negotiation and not know what your goals are, not know what maybe your ex's goals are, you're going to sort of be blindsided. So talk a little bit about that. What, in terms of what you think around that, like, have you had even a personal experience where you've gone into a situation of a negotiation of something, whether it's even as a lawyer for someone else or just in your personal life, where you were pretty prepared? You know where your boundaries were. You knew what you were negotiating. You knew where the line was, and how that turned out for you.
I feel like I'm in a job interview, and now I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, you better answer it really quick and really, really savvy, or else I'm not hiring you for my podcast.
Exactly. Well, I mean, a lot of those, right? In my personal life, I've walked away from stuff, quite a bit of stuff, because, including human beings, because it wasn't, like I said, I won't fight over that stuff. Like, I don't think dragging people through the mud and all that is a good idea. And I was dragged through the mud in the 90s, and I experienced them. That's probably why I'm the way I am now, where I don't want to do that. And I think, like, I talk to every one of my clients, like, number one, how much money are you spending? Great. Spend more money with me, because I'm going to take more vacations. I don't care. I don't care how much you spend. But, like, if I'm the one making the money, right? But I mean, I'm not motivated that way either. I just told a client this morning, you've already spent more than $7,000 dithering back and forth over this amount per month on a temporary order. So I said, like, you're going to end up, this is costing you more, right? It's benefiting me and my firm, but it's hurting you. And so you really don't know. People get very upset, like, and then they're not able to talk to their kids. Like, the other person isn't allowing, if they're not, my client lives in a different state, and so there needs to be like set times to talk to the kid, right? And you don't know until that moment how that person's going to react. And it is really unfortunate. Like, I mean, all you can do is deal with what you have, right? And there are people you really do have to have lawyers, because some people will not do what they're told unless it's like a judicial, like the lawyers are involved in telling them the judge is going to do this or a judge doesn't, right? And then there's people who won't even obey a judicial order.
Right.
And then you have to petition to enforce that judicial order, right? I have another client who's like, well, what if she doesn't pay me this $3,000? I said, well, then you'll get an order, but how much will it cost you to go? And it'll probably cost you more than that to pursue her. Right?
Yeah, right. I know I've dealt with that too before with like an eviction I was doing, or it just wasn't worth it. But I think like when we're talking about this idea of really figuring out what it is that you want, right? Because sometimes these things spiral and you get caught up on one thing, like what you're talking about is this, one little thing, and it's all of a sudden you dig in. And, but knowing kind of what you want from the beginning, even though that may change and new circumstances come up, but having a good idea. I think of it like as you mentioned, you're in a job interview, thinking of it as a job interview, right? Like when you go into a job interview, you're pretty clear about what salary range you're willing to take. Or you're pretty clear about the fact that you want to not work on the third Friday of the month. You have some of these things. If you don't have that in mind and you go in there, you're not going to know what to negotiate for. You're not going to know what your boundaries are, and you're going to leave there with potentially not anything that you wanted because you didn't clarify what you wanted. So,
well, if you're like getting along, then you should like sit down together and talk about it, right? Like,
yeah,
you can say, look, this is super emotional. Okay, we both should either get therapy or get help from our friends and probably not like process the breakup together, but let's go through the house and figure out what are the things, you know, that we want, and then sit down and talk about those again. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people can't.
Right. Possible. But even if you're not going to even interact with your ex, like going to your lawyer and saying, here's like, I need to have, you know, custody of this, or I want this. And even your lawyer might say, okay, let's bend on that. But at least you have some clarity. Like, do you or do you not want to have custody of your child? You know, like I said, I had a split and I had to figure out to what extent we were going to co-parent.
Right.
And I had to be very clear about what I was willing to do to fight for or to advocate for custody, or was I willing to say, you know what, I can do weekends. But I had to be clear about that before I got anyone else involved. But I have a funny story about me not being clear about what I wanted and then got taken advantage of. So I walked into a car dealership many, many years ago, and I had a car, a little Ford. It was already paid off, and I went into this car. No, it was a Ford. Oh goodness, what was it? Aspire, kind of like a Festiva. It's like the basic of a car.
Like a little economy car,
little tiny car. So I went into this car dealership. I was living in the Bay Area, and I walked in and I saw an Isuzu Rodeo, and I was like, oh, I want that car. Well, I went over and it was just way too expensive. So the guy takes me over to another car, and he's like, here's another Isuzu Rodeo. It's like 5 years older. And I'm like, but I don't want a car that's older than the one that I have. And he's like, but it's an Isuzu Rodeo. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he said, it's stick shift. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know how to drive stick shift. And if you've ever been to the Bay Area, you know that that's not the place you want to learn how to drive stick shift. But what I did, it was not so much that I acquiesced and I did end up buying the Rodeo, was that the very first thing I said to the salesperson when he came up to me was, today is my birthday and I'm buying a car. So he
knew he had you.
He knew he had me. I showed all my cards and I wasn't clear about what I wanted. And I left there, traded my car in, left there with a car older than the one I had a 5-year car payment, a stick shift in the Bay Area that I don't know how to, I couldn't even drive it. I think I had to get a friend drive it home for me. And so, but that's because I wasn't clear about what I wanted. Because
you were clear because that's what you wanted, but you showed your cards.
I showed my cards.
What you showed was a vulnerability that allowed that person to pounce on you.
Right, and basically not hold true to what I wanted, because what I wanted was not an older car, and I didn't want a stick shift. And I basically told him that it didn't really matter what I want because I'm buying something today anyways. So I think my lesson learned from that was really just being very clear and holding firm to what I want, and then not necessarily, I'm not saying not be transparent, but just be very clear about what you want and don't acquiesce on those things by giving it away. And that was
it. But here's the thing. You were vulnerable and transparent to someone that you shouldn't have been, right? So there's different situations, and you need to be clear about that also. Like, who should you be vulnerable and transparent to? Not somebody who's making their living off of, you know, getting you to purchase something that maybe is not in your best interest, right? But if it's your partner that you've been with for 10 years, just be transparent and vulnerable. Like, I think that's, okay, so those are like, it's like two opposite scenarios, right? You go into this car dealership, you really should not show your cards because we know they have to earn a living. I have nothing against them. And that's their job, is to find what they're into you, right? So you gave him the in right away. I'm going to get something. It's my birthday. And he's like, oh, fantastic. And let me get this crap car off my lot. This girl. Right? But then if you're in a relationship for 10 years and then you guys are like, this just isn't working, let's split up, you can be vulnerable. You can say, like, I'm really hurt, or this is really sad, or this is very hard, and yet I feel like we should still split up. So can we do this in the most amicable way possible? But if you start out hiding your cards with that person, or being not vulnerable and just being like, you know what, screw you, it's been 10 years, peace out. Right? You're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to make that person mad. And yeah, sometimes people can use our vulnerability to exploit us or hurt us, but that's where we need to be clear. Okay, who is this person across from me, right? Should I open myself up or not? And I do believe in relationships that are not abusive, you should be as open as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I think if you're in something where it's contentious, that it's not that you don't want to not show your cards, but also, basically saying like, I don't know where I'm going to live if I don't have this house. And then you basically say that you'd do anything for that house. And then the other person's like, okay, well, you can have the house, but I'm going to get the entire savings account. It's just being aware of where your own allegiances lie and what's important to you. And, like I said, the breakup I had was incredibly amicable. We showed all of our cards. We wanted to do what was in the best interest of taking care of both of us and taking care of our child. But I also know that in some conflict negotiation, particularly when you get a lawyer involved, and you've seen this with opposing counsel, is ramping it up when it doesn't need to be ramped up. And so showing all your cards to that opposing counsel isn't always the best idea. Not that you're not disclosing assets, but talking about the importance of certain things. Like, well, my client will do anything to keep the house. Like, that might end up being really tricky, that you get taken advantage of. So it's important, I think, to just assess that situation.
Well, hopefully you've been doing that in your relationship, but, hopefully. I mean, maybe you haven't. And, I mean, we've talked to enough therapists on here that most people don't seek therapy until it's too late. And you're really not going to suddenly start having a healthier dialogue, although it's possible. I shouldn't say you're not going to, but it's possible, like, in a breakup, right? I mean, maybe it's where two people have decided, like, you know what, you're right. I'm glad you decided we should break up because you're not happy. I'm not happy. But doesn't mean I don't care about you. We can't stay friends or whatever. But it's hard, and it's hard to keep the emotion out of it. And that's the other thing. When you're negotiating, right, you should be in as neutral of a position as possible, because when you're desperate, and people are desperate in divorces. I mean, you have children to think about that you have to feed and clothe and house. I mean, I don't know how parents are doing it. It's so expensive. It's crazy expensive. And it's weird because some people are making more and more money in this society and some people are making less, and the price of everything's going up. So I don't think you can also say to take out desperation, because there is desperation in divorce. I mean, there just is. It's scary. It's very scary.
Right. Well, and when people are desperate, they act in ways that might be out of character for them, too. So that's where we talk about people slipping into really competitive kinds of or aggressive demeanors to get what they want. They're so afraid that they're not going to have anywhere to live that they'll do anything to keep the house themselves or whatever it might be. And it becomes problematic. I mean, the best kind of conflict is really one in which the disagreement is resolved amicably and in a win-win situation. But it isn't necessarily always like that, because people do have emotion. It's not always
possible.
Yeah, there's emotion behind it. There's history behind it. Let me ask you this, though, because, and I know from someone who teaches conflict management and communication is, talking about the way you show up in any kind of a negotiation, especially when you're in person with someone and you're negotiating with them, is your demeanor, right? And like, if you can approach it sort of calmly and like from a win-win standpoint, you're probably more likely to get somewhere than actually drawing lines in the sand, or, you're accusatory or blaming or those kind of things. Have you, I know in my world, this is what we teach, but, in your world, in the legal world, have you seen this where people have, like in person ramped up the situation just by like finger pointing or a snide comment or something where they change the tone of the negotiation?
Well, of course. Especially in relationships, because they bring up everything that the other person's ever done, drugs, sleeping with other people. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stuff that totally shocked me, that things were just suddenly, that like we were doing it in especially in mediation that I did before, like we're having we're going to split this, we're going to do that, and then suddenly something triggers that person, and they're like, you were doing cocaine, and you made me move here, and you were having affairs, and like totally shocking stuff that comes out, right? Because if it touches someone's emotion, they're going to react.
Well, and it usually doesn't end up good, because the other person then retaliates, but you did this or you did that, or at least it changes from a
well, there has to be a facilitator, right?
Right.
If there's not a facilitator, then people are just going to attack each other. I mean, that's what they do, right? They're upset. They're pissed that you are breaking up. They're pissed that you had that affair. They're pissed that you did drugs. They're pissed that, you did whatever. I mean, and when you go to break up, everything that you didn't like about what that person did is going to come up in your mind. And if there's not a facilitator, and if you don't have one in your own mind to get you to calm down, you're going to bring all of that out in these negotiations. That's totally normal. That's why having a decent mediator or having a decent attorney is important.
Right. And then in some scenarios, the two people can't even be in the same room together. It's not physically or emotionally safe, and other people have to do those negotiations. I know you're always making calls to the other lawyer and negotiating without those two people having to sit in the two clients having to sit.
Well, yeah, but if they're co-parents, they're usually talking anyway. Even I have situations where one person was abusive and they still talk because they're co-parents. They still go to events together and they have to. So, there's some where there's an order of protection and things are so dangerous they can't be anywhere near that person. That's totally different, right? But there are parents who there has been abuse in the relationship. There has been terrible things that have happened, but they have to co-parent. Once you have children together, here's the other thing that everybody should understand. You're going to have children with another human being. That person's likely going to be in your life and the kid's life until forever, until they die. That's the fact, People think that they can have kids, they choose to continue forward with having the child, and then they think they'll just take care of the child and this and that, but the other parent has a right to that kid. Parenting is a fundamental constitutional right, and people don't really get that. I would not have a child with someone, ever again. I did, contribute to that in the 90s, and that person took that kid away from me. And I legally didn't have any rights. So I would never, ever, ever, ever do that again. And people don't understand that. When it's two biological parents, that is a fundamental constitutional right that cannot be taken away without extreme circumstances.
Yeah.
So good luck. And also you better plan to be able to financially take care of that kid on your own, because sure, people can go to jail if they're not paying their child support, but that doesn't mean you're getting paid. Especially if that person's sitting in jail with no money.
Well, so I don't take care of the kid. Yeah.
Large families. I don't know how those people do it, but the reality is the courts are not always going to be able to help you. So really you need to think, can I afford this house on my own? Can I afford these children on my own? And people set themselves up for adulthood as if they're always going to be with a partner who's going to contribute.
Right. And that's not always the case. We flow in and out of relationships. Have a partner that can't contribute or doesn't contribute.
They get a head injury. They get in a car accident.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, and then we're talking a lot about how do you deal with the conflict negotiation of the divorce itself, right? The divorce process. But when you're talking about co-parenting, as somebody who co-parents, there's a constant negotiation. So it's not just that they're the other co-parent is in your life. You have to make decisions that are going to be outside of the specter of any kind of a co-parenting agreement, things you don't even know. Do you want this person to opt into the health class or not? Do they need to have two signatures to go to the field trip? Do you, how, are you agreeing for them for their class schedule for school, or what are the pickup times? Everything has to be negotiated, even how much to spend on a pair of shoes. That's too much. That's too little. They need good shoes. All of that is a constant negotiation. So you have to you have to be able to, A, be very clear about where you stand on these things, but B, also have some good conflict negotiation strategies so that you can continue to revisit the process over and over and over. Because it's exhausting. It's every little decision. It's it is exhausting.
And even if you have sole legal decision making, guess what? You have to let that other person know about everything. I've had two clients who got totally chewed out in court because they have sole legal decision making. The other person was never even involved. And then my clients are getting in trouble because they didn't proactively put every little thing in let the other parent know about appointments and stuff, which is absurd. but that's how it is. Mm-hmm. So even if you have sole legal decision making in primary residential custody, doesn't mean that you're like off the hook for communicating with that other parent.
Yeah. Right.
Even if that parent's in prison, guess what? You still have to let them know stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. You did think, oh, that person's in prison? Doesn't matter.
Yeah. They still need to know when the dentist appointment is.
You know?
Yeah.
But for real.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the whole process of being with another human being is negotiation. I mean, when you're in a partnership, it's negotiating everything from, you know, what you're having for dinner to where you're going on vacation to if somebody's going to quit their job or not. And then you're negotiating a divorce because you're trying to settle and figure out in an ideal world a win-win, but it doesn't always turn out like that. But then you're going to have to negotiate if you have anything together after, whether that's children, it could be a pet, it could be, there was at one point that my ex and I were going to keep our rental house and actually rent it out and use that money to put into a college fund. And then we decided we didn't want to be landlords together for the rest of our lives. So but if you do, you have a business together or anything, right, you're going to be negotiating that. So this process of negotiation is really critical. And so just being clear about what you want, being clear about what they want, trying for a win-win, getting a facilitator like you're talking about, whatever. In some cases, it's a mediator. We used a therapist. We've used financial advisors as mediators. You can, whoever's going to help. You can use a lawyer, right, whatever. But then just knowing that whatever your process is, sticking to it. So if there's a difficult decision that needs to be made, you use that same negotiation process, whatever that might be. It could be the person who's presenting an idea like, you know, the kid wants to get a new bicycle, and then you present that to the other person, and then the other person has to ask the questions, and then you say, okay, I have all the answers that you want. Like whatever process you choose, if you agree to that process, it's going to make your conflict negotiation so much easier as you move forward. You just use the same process for everything, whether it's a bike or, you know, kids getting a haircut or ear piercing. We went 10 rounds on ear piercing.
Yeah, well, I've had agreements written up about who has final say on hairstyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's real.
Seriously,
I've lived it.
People can really fight over stuff that you would never think about when you're like, oh, I'm in love, let's have a kid together.
Right.
So are you going to be fighting over who gets final say on their hair?
Yeah, I mean, and people are fighting over that in the relationship, and then it's even worse when you're not in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And then the court gets involved, the lawyers are involved, you know? I mean,
yeah.
It's kind of a tragedy. It makes me sad. This conversation's making me sad. It's sad.
Well,
yeah, it is sad.
It is sad. I mean, it's hard when two people fall in love. They have this kind of idyllic view of we're going to be together forever until we're, you know, we die.
I'm going to fall in love again, but I'm certainly not going to join assets or
no.
give up my house
have children.
No, or have children. Never. No. Or share pets. No.
No.
I mean, I kind of just did the sharing pet thing, and it's fine because we're friends, my ex, the most recent ex and I. But, that was a little touchy for a minute there. And it's interesting. As I sit here and contemplate, will I ever get involved again with someone? Romantically, sure, I'd like to. But I don't want any other problems. Right? I literally don't want to fight. I don't want to fight over anything ever again about my house, my money, my streaming services. It's a real bummer, you know?
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the best ways to deal with conflict is to just prevent the things
it. There we go.
Will cause it.
Right.
You know, and that's how I've approached subsequent relationships after the one I've been talking about is really your stuff's your stuff, my stuff's my stuff. And it's been, you know, fairly easy to know whose assets are whose. I'm not merging them again. But I know that many of our listeners are in a situation where they've already merged assets. Right. They've already had children, and they have to figure out some conflict management or conflict negotiation strategies to work through these things. And so I think what's really probably helpful, because not everybody can prevent the things that they've already engaged in, is really thinking about how do you go forward. So if you're going through divorce and then potentially co-parenting or, you know, co-doing anything, is thinking about a process that you both can agree to make decisions. Because here's the deal. You bring in someone to make a decision for you, which may need to happen, as we've talked about, and they make that one decision. Okay, 5 minutes later, there's another thing that needs a decision. And so having some kind of a process, some kind of an agreement, whatever that looks like, as to how you're going to deal with conflict can be very, very helpful so that, you can do it as you go, as opposed to like every time we have a disagreement about a haircut or an ear piercing, I cannot call a therapist and get in and have this deep discussion about how we feel deeply about ear piercing. Like we just don't have the ability to do that. So do we have a process? Yeah, we go back and forth. We talk about pros and cons. We let our child now pipe in with her ideas and then we make the decision jointly. And that's worked for us. But finding that process is really important or you're going to be running back to your mediator every 5 minutes about what dog food you should be giving.
Well, but that's the thing is that you have to like, when you go to respond to stuff, you have to make sure that you're not amping up, that your initial feeling response doesn't come out, right? So you have to take some time and be calm. And that's why I suggest using the parenting apps, because the parenting app will keep people from acting out towards the other person generally. It's very helpful for that.
Yeah, it's nice to have like a third-party platform. And here's the other thing when you said, too, about the time, I think that's really important is, if you have your ex or soon-to-be ex is, pushing for something that they really want and backing you into a corner with time, like we need to know, that it's okay to say, listen, I need to look this up or I need to do a little research or I need to think about this. I need some more time because sometimes we make the worst decisions when we do things like go into a car dealership and yell, I'm going to buy a car today, right? Like what if there wasn't anything on the lot that I was even remotely interested in? At that point, I'd almost committed myself to rushing to buy a car when I could have just been kind of cruising through the lot. And so
right. But you have to, even if you're rushing to buy a car, you have to act like you're cruising through the lot. And also, even if somebody is saying, like, we got to rush, you might have to rush. There might be a mortgage issue. There might be, we need to sell this house. But you need to still do your due diligence. And you need to not be an avoidant. Avoidant behavior does nothing to further anything. It doesn't help. Avoidant behavior is, it's not helpful.
Right. I mean, you have to make the decision anyways, and all it's doing is just getting everybody upset and potentially puts you in a pickle, right? Like if you're avoiding something and then it's like the mortgage is due tomorrow and I'm still not hearing back from you, it creates such unnecessary angst. So,
but that's how I think why a lot of relationships fail. And we talked to Una, and she does those divorce groups, and she said that people they've already failed, right? Like in the relationship, a lot of people are staying longer than they should because they try. And that process comes out in the breakup. It's replicated in the breakup, It's very frustrating.
Right. So there's a balance between what is timely, right? Like what do you have to make a decision on right now and then being on top of it so you have some time to make an informed decision. And then the other part is if it's not as timely, not being forced to, like right now, like if my ex would call me from the mall and be like, we're sitting here in the ear piercing chair. Is it okay if she gets her ears pierced? That puts me in a position where I have, I'm either going to disappoint my child by saying no and have them get out of the chair, or I'm going to have to just say yes, even though I haven't really thought through it. So it's also okay to set up a process if you can, if it's amicable, to say, don't get in the chair yet. Don't make promises until we've talked about it. And that was something that we've talked about more recently, and I really particularly appreciate that. But, it's also okay to say when the kid's in the ear piercing chair, like, not today. Not today. We didn't talk about this. So don't try to force me to make a decision that I wouldn't.
Well, a lot of people just do it anyway.
Yeah, I know.
And then you deal with the follow-up or the sequelae from that. I mean, but that's a reality too, is people are going to just do stuff. And once something is done, it's done. You either need to accept it and move on and say, hey, let's try to make this process better for the future. But a lot of people aren't going to cooperate. Right? No. A lot of people are just going to do what they want to do and do it in their way. So then you have to figure out, how much am I going to fight with this person? Or am I always reacting to this person? Do I have any power here? But I do see people going, I was just looking through my whole caseload this morning and I have a client who just got divorced 3 months ago, 2 months ago, maybe we signed the divorce papers, and already there's problems, major problems. And I'm like, well, he signed something to reverse the agreement we just signed with the judge, And some of the stuff is just, it's not, I think people need to understand that if there's a legal divorce that's about to happen, which is what we're mostly talking about this season, are legal divorces, this is a long haul process. So it's not something, these are not things tidied up and, oh, it may be so nice to agree with this person about how we're going to introduce somebody, a new dating partner, how we're going to get their ears pierced, whatever. The other person will just go and do it. And then you're left reacting to it. And then you have to decide, is my reaction going to be nuclear or just like, okay, and know that like this is how this person was in your relationship, probably just missing a lot of your feelings. I mean, that's just a reality. And then you have to say, oh, the reality is I'm co-parenting with somebody who really doesn't give a crap about my feelings. And then you have to decide, how much am I going to let this bother me, my peace of mind, and all that. I mean, some things you're just not going to win. Some things you just can't negotiate. That is life. You can try your best, but the other person's going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, and that does happen. I mean, hopefully.
Happens a lot.
I mean, and you know, it's like I think it's still worth trying. Like my ex and I have found some rhythm with that. About 98% of our decisions, we are on the same page.
Because you're super reasonable.
Well, yes.
And my best friend went through that, like a lot, where she was super, super reasonable with a very psycho ex, right? And I mean, she went through hell, but she always had to maintain for the kid. You know what I mean? And there's just some things that you're just going to have to endure. I mean, that is the reality.
That's the preventing conflict that you were talking about earlier. Sometimes it's
don't
not
get
worth
with a psycho. But a lot of people don't know that person's a psycho when they get with them.
Yes, or how they're going to act. But just in general is like sometimes there just aren't things to fall on the sword for. Like, is it worth it to get all upset about the ear piercing right in that moment? Is it when
it's already done?
I mean, at that point, you know, like sometimes go along with some things, but there are, other things that I, hold the line on that are really important. And so that's part of conflict negotiation is you can't dispute every single thing. You pick your battles because it is what it is. And sometimes you have to say, we're just going to do things differently. We're going to see this divorce differently. We're going to see equity differently. We're going to see co-parenting differently. And just, you have to accept the fact that you may not agree. And that's part of conflict is also walking away. But the places that you can hold the line. And if your partner or your ex is like, okay, I'm going to listen to you, which does happen.
Right.
It does happen. It's worth trying and actually trying to find a win-win. That works for everybody.
Well, you should always try at first, but then you have to accept the reality of what is.
Right.
And that you have no control over someone else's behavior.
Yes, that is true. So those two things can coexist. You can try to have a healthy negotiation, a process set up, and you can, work towards that. And but also understanding that they have free agency to do what they're going to do anyways. And you have to sometimes let some of those things go. And some of them you don't let go. Some of them you fight and say, that's not worth it to me. Like, absolutely not.
Well, if your child's 14 and they want to go to school somewhere and the other person's blocking, then you fight, for the child to have some agency. But if like the ears are pierced, it's a done deal. Just move on.
Yeah.
Say, I don't appreciate that you did that, and move on. Because there's no point, and the judge doesn't care. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it.
Right, and it could blow up into something that's 6 months long of arguing over something that's already happened, right, at that point. So, I mean, really, if, kind of summating our conversation here really is this idea is preventing conflict is, probably one of the better strategies, like we're talking about at the front end where you're preventing it. But can't always prevent the conflict from happening, but can you try to find a win-win? Can you work with mediators? Can you have a process that works? Can you let it go if it's not something you're willing to fall on your sword for? But also being clear about what you want. And, like if I knew that ear piercing was a no-go, and that was so important to me, and I knew that before this whole experience, and I said, like, just so you know, when you get to the point where you're talking about ear piercing, we really need to talk about it. I didn't. It really wasn't that important to me, or else I would have brought it up earlier. So you just have to figure out what it is that you're willing to give on. That's part of it. It's, and I'm not a huge fan of compromise where nobody wins, because that's a lose-lose. Compromise is nobody gets what they want. A win-win is really where everybody finds something that's like an optimal solution for them that might not be the most obvious. right?
Well, when I was doing mediation, that's what I would say. Like, this is a voluntary process. You're both here to figure this out together, but you can leave at any time, right? So it's up to you. And so the goal of mediation is not that it's going to come out to be a 50-50 exactly equal and everyone's getting exactly, what they should per the law or whatever. It's that the two people can agree that this is okay, that this isn't ideal, but this never going to be ideal in a breakup, but this is what we can live with. And it actually, we're making this voluntarily. This is what we're choosing. And that's like when I do mediation, I don't want people signing the paperwork right then and there, right? They need to think about it. They need to come to an agreement and then go away and think about it so that they don't feel like they had to make a decision, right? Right then and there.
That's that rushing piece. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But you also can't have 2 weeks.
Right.
You need to go home and have a day and think about it, talk to your people who help you think things through, and then get a move on.
Exactly. Well, and if your goal is to come up with the most optimal solution for everybody, like, see, here's the thing. If I go in and I fight, right, and I want to get what I want, and I know, for instance, say whatever I get deprives you of something, then that isn't really a win for me, because in the end, I still might have to deal with you for other things. A win-win would be like, if I could get something that's optimal at the same time as you getting something that's optimal, then we have a negotiated relationship that means that we could probably go into future things, looking out for each other. Like, I can tell you with every person I've been with, I don't want them to be homeless after we split up. I don't want to.
Yeah, but you're like a reasonable. Wouldn't it be great if everyone was reasonable? I'm reasonable. You're reasonable. But there are people in this world who are not, who would be more than happy to see that person homeless.
Well, absolutely. And that's when I talk about more of the dysfunctional pieces. But if you're talking about amicable and functional,
right?
Then absolutely. It's more optimal for me for you to also get something that you need. Because I win with that, because then you're happy, you're satisfied, and then when we go into the next thing, you might do that for me. And again, assuming that there's a good relationship there, I haven't had a situation where I haven't really had that fully. So,
but also, it's even if you're done with each other, right, that the bad feelings are gone, or that, you know what I mean? You don't want to have, even if you're done, this is it, you're over, there's nothing else left to negotiate or whatever. At least there's not bad feelings. At least you didn't burn the house down and scar them on your way out. What is the point of that? But there are some people are just driven to do that.
Some people do that. And in that case, that's why we have legal processes and all that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, that's important. But, if you have somebody that's reasonable on the other end and you try to have a fair conflict, negotiation situation, and you try to look out for each other, or in my case, putting the child in the middle, putting it not between us, but as the center of everything, where is this the best decision for the child? That's how I approach those kinds of things. Then maybe it works, right?
Right.
Sure as heck is a lot better than fighting over a pot or a pan in the courts for 6 months.
People use that example. I've never seen that.
You've never seen them fight over the dishes?
No, never.
No. What is there anything people have fought over that has been like ludicrous?
Not for me. I mean, I'm on Slack with other attorneys in my firm, and there have been, I've seen that somebody over I forget what it was the other day, ceiling fans. I haven't had that, but I also don't attract that kind of client.
Ceiling fans. Oh my goodness.
I'm not interested. Just that, and it says it right on the website. Like I'm
not interested in your ceiling fans.
I'm not interested in petty fighting. You know what I mean? Like, I won't do it. I'm not the lawyer for you if that's what you want to do.
Right.
Because I have to live with myself also, and I have to go out and be in the world. And just because I work and do this doesn't mean that I'm going to, compromise my own morals.
Right. And your own angst. I mean, my God, it takes a lot to get all hyped up about something like ceiling fans. And you got to feel the emotion. It's like, do you need that adrenaline of ceiling fans running through you? That's silly.
But I guess they were glad they got them.
Well, there you go. I mean, if you're willing to fight for that. But all right, what's your final thought on if you were to give advice to someone who's already in a relationship, they're going through a divorce and they're trying to go through, do conflict negotiation through the divorce process. If they had one takeaway, what would that be?
Just be kind, right? Somebody said that, just be just or You have to live with yourself. So
yep.
Your behavior should be something that you can be proud of and live with. Even if you get hosed, who cares? I don't care. If somebody is that into money or whatever and I have to go start all over again, okay. And that's why I'm saying, even if I get into romantic love again, I'm not going to involve my house or assets because I don't want to lose again, right? I have been hosed. I don't care. I start over. I don't want to start over anymore because I'm over 55. So I'm not going to put myself in that situation. But I can look back and I can be fine with my behavior. And that's when I go to my grave, the only thing I have is my behavior and my ethics, right?
And your character. Yeah, right. How you showed up in this world.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So keep that intact, right? Really, if you're going to get really riled up and go crazy or act like a jerk because you're upset about something with them and then it makes you act in a way that's out of character, I would just rather, no, not interested in that.
No, I totally agree with you.
So that's my takeaway is just stick to your ethics, stick to the way that you want to be viewed in the world. You look at yourself and your behavior and say, okay, yeah, I handled that well. Knowing that these are not easy situations, you know?
Well, that's awesome. I mean, similar to like what I would say is my takeaway is find an optimal solution for everyone. If you approach it by trying to make sure that everybody is taken care of in a way that feels good, you're going to show up as a kind and respectful person.
Yeah, and there's not going to be a person out there like hating your guts. And if they do, that's because they have their own issues and they probably hate other people too, but not based on your behavior.
Right.
Like you didn't do anything to make that happen.
Exactly. So show up as your best self. I think that's our big takeaway here is conflict with kindness, conflict with optimal outcomes for everybody, conflict with respect. I mean, all of that is really, really important. To the best of your ability, you can control how you show up. You may not be able to control how the other person does, and you don't control how they show up, but you can always control how you show up. So being very clear and level-headed and feeling like you know what you want and then being able to be kind and just and fair, it may not get you the ceiling fan in the end, but you get to live with yourself.
Exactly, and you can get by one of those oscillating fans.
There you go.
On the floor.
Just buy an oscillating fan. All right, Tracy.
Stand-up oscillating fan.
Oh, now it's getting fancier. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for this awesome conversation. Really good to explore kind of the nature of conflict in the divorce process. And hopefully our listeners were able to glean some good tidbits out of that. And so to all of our listeners out there, until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.